Hey everyone, it's Simon Hurley and I'm a 14-year-old card maker. Today I'm super excited to be sharing these Distress Ink smooshing cards with you. This is a super fun and easy colorful technique, yet it's a little bit messy, so it's super fun. So let's get started. So we're gonna start off with our backgrounds today. I'm using watercolor cardstock here, and I've cut it down to my card base size to leave a little bit of a white border on it. So it's going to be 4 inches by 5 1/4. So we're going to start off by using these distress inks. For the first one, I'm going to be using abandoned coral and fossilized amber. I'm going to start off with the lightest color and then move on to the darker one. So for this lightest color, we're going to start off by using the acetate from your stamp set. So if you just pull this off, this is the background for the stamp set. You can easily clean it after you're done, but this is going to be our workspace for now. So we're using the fossilized amber ink. We're going to open it up and just spread some right onto the piece of plastic. Then once you're done with that, just take your sprayer bottle and just mist that a little bit so you have some nice little round beads on there, and you can even swish it with your finger to blend it all together. And then you need to flip it over, and you can bring it to the center of your cardstock and just smush it around on there. This is super fun, and you can lift it up, move the ink around however much you want to control it on your card. Then you'll see these little droplets left. You can just kind of swish those around and move them around and keep kind of pushing your acetate until you get the desired look. So once I have a little background that I like laid down, I'm going to heat set this so we can move on to our next layer. Then for your next layer, you're going to bring back in the fossilized amber, except this time we're going to make it just a little bit darker and more concentrated for the second layer. So I'm adding some ink onto there, and instead of spraying it a ton, we're going to go from a little bit more of a distance and then spray it. And you'll notice how you'll just have those little droplets instead of the larger ones. And this is going to create some texture for your background. So you're just going to add those on, and you'll see that it creates nice, darker drops in the center, and that's what you want for the texture there. We're going to let this dry as well, or heat set it if you're impatient like me. Making sure it's nice and dry in between layers is super important if you want that nice defined color after the layer is dry. So now we're going to move on to the abandoned coral color, and this is going to give us our darker color over top of the yellow. You're not going to want to add too much of this, otherwise it'll overpower the yellow, and you're going to want to make sure it's nice and watered down as well. So I'm going to spray that about 3 times. And then I'm going to lift up the acetate sheet, and we're going to add it down onto here as well. I'm going to try to concentrate it more in the center than anything, and you can kind of bring some of the drops that are smaller on the outside as well. This is going to give us a nice grounding place for our critter right in the center later on. So I'm going to heat set this, and I'll be right back. We're going to do one more layer with the abandoned coral and really concentrating the color again, just like we did with that yellow. And then I'm just going to spray this just like I did the other one and just finish off the card with this last layer, making sure it's nice and dark right in the center. And I'm going to heat set this one last time. Now I'm going to be showing how to do the blue background as well. So now we're going to adhere these to our card bases, and we can start working on the coloring and the rest of our cards. So we have 2 top folding card bases here that are 5 1/2 by 4 1/4, and we're just going to add these right on top. So I'm just using a little bit of tape runner right around the edges. And this is a watercolor piece, so you don't want it to come up, so just use a lot of tape runner. And you don't want anything to come up from the center as well. Then I'm just going to add it right onto the card base, and there's going to be a little bit of a white border right around the piece. I'm going to do the same thing with the red one as well, just adding a little bit of tape runner right around the edges to make sure it sticks down really nicely. And then quite a bit in the center as well, because we don't want anything coming up. And then just adding it right down onto our top folding card base. So once this is finished, we can move on to our coloring of the images. So for this, I'm just using a regular piece of heavyweight cardstock, and we're gonna grab our two images here, this little sloth hanging from a tree and the one right in front of his birthday cake. I just love these little sloths. And then I'm going to take the larger acrylic block and just mount both of them at once. You can stamp them both together. I'm going to ink them both up using Memento Tuxedo Black ink, which is a Copic-friendly ink, so nothing will bleed. And just ink it up really nicely, just making sure there's a coat of ink over top of all of it. And then stamp it right down onto your card. Once that's done, we can move right into our coloring. I'm going to color both of the images to match their background. So this one's going to be in the red, cooler tone of the family, and this one's going to have a blue tint to it. So I'm going to start off by just coloring his little bow tie and accessories. Just using a little feathering motion so we can blend out to other colors. And then I'm going in with the lightest color as well. You're going to want to pick several shades for each one. That'll give you a nice depth and dimension to the image. Unless if you just want to do one full wash of a color, that's good too. So I'm moving on to just coloring the actual sloth, and I'm just going to add shadows wherever the lines kind of meet. So where this patch of his head meets his body, we're going to add some shading. And there's also some little lines that were added into the design, and we're going to add some shading there as well. And that just helps you out while you're coloring. So for these Copic markers, they have numbers and color families as well. You're going to want to stick to those when you're finding your blending colors. So you'll see them on the barrels of the Copic markers. You can definitely stray away from those if you want a different look. Like for these, I'm going with a cool tone for the darker one, and then for the lighter color, we're going with a warmer tone. But usually you want to stick to those same color families and you'll get a really nice blended effect. Don't expect the blending for these markers to be perfect every single time. There's definitely a trial and error process with it, and you might have to go through a couple practices. But if you even make a little mistake, like I might have today right here, you can just keep going on with it and it'll look great on your card anyway. Here are the little die cuts that come with the set. You just have to clip them off, and then you have the little individual ones. This is the cutting side, and then you just have to flip it over and line it up with your image. Making sure it's nice and lined up is key, so just take your time because you'll have the little white border on the outside and you don't want it to be a little off. And I just try to keep my tape on the outside of the image and the die so that it won't stick to your image and accidentally ruin all your coloring when you pull it out. You probably have a couple washi tape rolls laying around, so just peel off some of that tape, make sure it's not too sticky so that it doesn't rip your cardstock, and that's what's holding down my dies here. So then I'm just going to put on the top plate and run it right through the big shot. So after that's all cut out, you can just pop out your images and they have that nice little white border right around them. These dies are a pretty big time saver, especially if you line them up perfectly, you'll get a really nice white border. So after our images are all colored and cut out, we're gonna move on to working on the sentiment. So the two sentiments I'm using is Hey Girl and Eat Cake Today. The Eat Cake Today sentiment did have a candle on it. However, you can always cut your images really carefully apart. I did that and it just removes really carefully and easily. If that's not for you though, you can always keep it attached and you can always reattach it if it is cut off. But I just wanted that sentiment without the candle there, and then I'm using this Hey Girl sentiment as well. So I'm just gonna mount both of the sentiments onto the same acrylic block. We're just gonna stamp them at the same time and then we're gonna cut them apart in a little bit. So to stamp these, we're going to be using archival ink. This will give us a nice crisp black image. So just ink them up and make sure they have lots of ink, and then stamp it down onto your cardstock. And then do the same thing with the other sentiment as well. And I just love these fun sentiments to match the little corky sloths. So after that, I'm going to be cutting these out. I'm using scissors that have a spring in them as well, so it's really easy. They just spring back at you, and you can really just easily cut out your images. So I'm just going to cut around these, and then we're going to cut closely around them, leaving a little bit of a white border, kind of like the die cutting machine gave the sloths. This will coordinate everything back together. And this doesn't have to be too perfect, just cut right around it, and if you make a little bit of a mistake, just keep going. So once we're done with all of that, we're going to assemble everything onto our cards, and we're going to assemble the little images on using some foam tape here. So I'm just going to pull some off, and then I'm going to remove the backing as well, and then we can add some onto our images. So I'm just going to tear it and add it right onto the little sloths. And then I'm just going to adhere it to that point in the card where we made it a lot darker, and that's going to give us the nice contrast that we wanted. And then we're going to do the same thing with the birthday image. And I'm just adding foam tape on the back of that, and we're going to add it right where we added all that contrast. So after we're done with that, we're going to add our sentiments on using foam tape as well. I'm just going to rip off some, and then this time we're going to cut it in half, just because these sentiments are a little smaller than our images and a little bit more intricate. And then you can add these pieces of foam tape right on to your sentiments. And since we cut these sentiments out, you can kind of fit them in wherever they fit. So I'm just going to put it right next to this little sloth here in this groove. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this sentiment as well, just adding a little bit of foam tape on the back of it, and then we can kind of fit it into a groove on our card. So I'm just going to add this one right next to the little sloth, and I'm kind of adding that at an angle. The sentiments don't need to be straight or anything, and they can be added onto your card like that. And so that basically finishes up both of the cards for today. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day and stopping by to watch this lesson. I hope you guys learned a little bit more and will try this watercolor smooshing technique. I would love to see some of your projects, and be sure to eat cake today.